exploring the intersection of AI and HR. This is the AI HR Daily Podcast.
Hello and welcome everyone to our fifth episode already of our AI HR Daily Podcast. We are really excited about this one because today is our second deep dive session where we go deeper into one specific sub department, I would say, of the HR domain. And last time we looked at the workforce planning and AI use cases in this subdomain. And today we are talking about recruiting, which is kind of like our also main focus area, which we have in our day-to-day work with Ovi. And therefore really excited to discuss this in a lot of depth today itself. Right, Chris?
For sure. I think last time, just as a quick recap, we talked about workforce planning, and workforce planning as per itself was a super interesting topic for us because we've implemented it with a few clients, and I hope we also gave you guys a bit of an in-depth analysis of what that actually means, how to implement AI in workforce planning. So today is, as Tim already mentioned, one of the most important topics where AI is being implemented right now. And we see it in practice in a lot of companies all over the world. I think today is going to be the topic where we're the most subject matter experts because we've just spent so much time with recruiters on calls and implementing flows, obviously Ovi, our platform. And I'm really excited for this one.
Yes, cool. And I think without further ado, let's jump into the use cases, maybe just to give you like a quick glimpse of where we are across the like HR chain of activities. We are now talking about the second step kind of. So we had planning as mentioned already. Now we're going really deep into recruiting. And then we still have these topics and the related AI use cases around these topics in the sessions ahead. So Chris, maybe let's kick it off with talking about the kind of very first use case, which we are also like covering with our platform Ovi in form of our AI agent Sora, which is basically an AI headhunter, right? Because in recruiting, and this is how we see it, you most of the time have one of two extremes. So you either have too many applicants or you have too less applicants if you look at really niche profiles and industry, right? Industries. And here for the later issue, having not enough applicants or not the right applicants, Sora comes into place and unfolds a lot of value. So maybe like, could you explain us in a bit more depth, what is Sora, what does she do, and how is she adding value?
Yeah. I mean, as you already correctly said, people first of all have to understand what they're actually looking for. So there is a big differentiation between not only the type of role or the niche of role, but also the seniority. So the more senior you go, the less applicants you're going to get in. You're not going to be able to find a CEO with a LinkedIn job posting, most likely. However, I think the most important thing, if we kick it off with headhunting, is actually trying to understand what headhunting is. And headhunting, the process of headhunting, obviously means headhunting people through referrals, through networks, through public social media profiles, through LinkedIn. So everything surrounding actively looking for a profile where you can actively reach out to the people to ask them if they're interested in an open role. And this is the mechanism that we're replicating with Sora, where you give an input, which is essentially an intent of what profile you're looking for. Let's imagine it's an head of AI position. And with this natural language as an input that you give, you actually can source for people in global databases. This is where it gets interesting, right? So, Tim, maybe now talking to so many executive search companies and recruitment agencies, how's everyone doing it right now?
Yeah, it's quite a cumbersome process, I would say. So everyone is going on LinkedIn and in the first place needing a LinkedIn recruiter license, which is really expensive for most of the companies, or in perception of most of the companies, compared to the value they are getting out of this. Once you have obtained this like kind of really expensive license, you have to manually define a lot of different filter criterias, which are kind of black and white and deterministic filters around like seniority, industry, certain interests, and so on and so forth. And once you have then really set all of these filters and parameters, only then you receive a list. And then you also receive quite a long list of potential candidates to look into. And this is quite a time-intensive and complex process to learn, compared to something like Sora, where you basically just give in a job description, then Sora is structuring everything for you in like nice-to-haves, must-haves, obviously, location, years of experience, and things like this, and is then going off and like trying to find the best possible talents for you across different bases, and also obviously providing you contact details of different types. So looking at obviously the LinkedIn profile, looking at the email details here, trying to obviously provide private emails because you don't want to approach people on their work email for such a matter, and then also phone numbers. So this is, I would say, the comparison and like how it looks like for traditional searching.
And you mentioned two problems. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned two problems in that process. So on the one hand, LinkedIn also has an AI now. You can type in whatever you want. But the big goal of the LinkedIn is always to show as many profiles as possible. So it can still be that I type in head of AI of startup XYZ and I get 1,000 profiles, right? And the second layer, which is the contact details, you actively can write them a message on LinkedIn with LinkedIn Recruiter, but the probability that they reply is not super high. So you have to find different mechanisms like email, like phone numbers, to actually reach out to them through different channels to understand and to get like a more direct access to them. Because this is the biggest problem with headhunting. Mm-hmm. Why are people even interested in headhunting? So what was your experience with being headhunted?
I mean, what was my experience in being headhunted is kind of similar to like a sales process like cold outreach sales, right? So someone is approaching you, then they send you a connection request, and then they start sending you emails about the job and why you would be a good fit and why this might be a nice opportunity to advance your career and things like this. And from there, basically, you then advance in like conversations, or mostly like phone call style, and then you get in touch with the actual like company which is hiring, right? And I think here also a great like way how to not cut out the middleman, but be less reliant on this middleman headhunter is to use such AI headhunters where everyone, also internal recruiters, can go in, type like hand over the JD, and then get profiles back, and then being actively supported in like addressing these profiles, because it's kind of, as mentioned, like sales, right? So you have to connect with them, you have to send them a LinkedIn message, you have to send them a follow-up, you have to send them an email, you maybe have to send over on WhatsApp, and all of these things can then also be highly automated and highly tailored based on the individual talent you are hunting for, right?
Yeah. I just think that headhunters, the incentives are not really aligned, because what happens most of the times is that a headhunter goes out, reaches out to a person like you and says, hey, we're looking for this and this candidate for one of our clients. Mm. And I think we've both made this experience. So I went through the process once where headhunter reached out, had a couple of calls, was pretty much aligned with what we're looking for. Then I had interviews with the company. And then in the final round, it turned out that my salary expectations were completely off with what they had in mind, even though it was mentioned a couple of times throughout the whole process. And the headhunter, which is the person that refers me, right, in this process, just pushed me through, even though he knew that my salary expectation doesn't match at all. Yeah. And this is what I hate about the process, and why headhunters, in most cases, are not the best people to source for you, right?
Yes,
because obviously they earn a ton of money, right?
I mean, obviously they have a lot of values they provide for such a process in terms of like field expertise, having the network of people. But obviously everyone has their own incentives. So do we with the OVI, so has a headhunter, so has like an internal recruiter, which and these incentives obviously come with pros and cons for the
Sure.
other parties involved here, be it the potential talent, the company, and so on and so forth. Cool.
But I think also candidates get burned, right? Candidates get burned in the process. If they have a bad experience with a headhunter, their incentive is not pretty like high to push forward, even though everyone's interested in a new role based on different factors, right?
True. That's very much true. And if you are actually actively looking for a job, you would apply for different opportunities you might see on LinkedIn or somewhere else. And I think this is an ideal segue into our next use case, which is CV screening. It's quite a like a simple but really beautiful use case, which adds an insane amount of value, especially in industries and geographies where you have a lot of inbound applicants. So let's say you post a role, you get 500 applicants, and then simply recruiters don't have the capacity to look into all of these CVs and give everyone a fair chance. And here AI is really coming into the picture and providing a level playing field for everyone who is applying, in terms of like giving everyone a look and evaluating everyone on a fixed requirement set, which can be defined by a recruiter. And to be honest, this is for us. Please, Chris, tell me if you see it differently. The use case which has currently the highest leverage in recruiting when looking into AI use cases, because it's so much more efficient, much more scalable, much more fairer, also in our opinion, compared to traditional CV reviews. And it's just beneficial for applicants, for recruiters, and for the companies itself as well, because you don't miss out on candidate number 459, which might be the best fit for the specific role, right?
Yeah, I agree and disagree. So for now, in this point of time, CV screening is the most important element to filter down a ton of candidates. However, I assume within the next 12 months, this is going to shift towards down the funnel, where CV screening will be a nice initial filtering, but we'll have a lot of good candidates with good CVs. Because nowadays with AI, everything is possible, right? Candidates can manually create a new CV for every job description. So that's what I think later down the funnel, where it gets a bit more qualitative, we're going to see a lot more leverage. But right now, I agree. If we have a role with 4,500 applicants and a normal ATS that does keyword filtering, you have no chance to replicate a recruiter's way of screening CVs. And this is exactly where a tool like ours comes into play. And the leverage is shown from the first moment. You get your data into the system, you screen candidates in a couple of minutes, and you know who you should speak to. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think from a candidate perspective, it's still pretty critical. If you're looking for a job and you apply to 100 different jobs, it's never great. But at least if you get some kind of response, I think this is where we have to be positioned, right?
Yeah. And I sometimes, obviously, we receive the feedback that we are losing the human touch here. And to be honest, I couldn't disagree more, because actually we, in the first place, give everyone a look with our AI, or in general, you give everyone a look with an AI. And in the second step, you also always kind of have an expert look at your CV, right? Because you have the LLM, which is obviously much, much more knowledgeable on these subdomains of the corporate world, compared to like a general recruiter who recruits the one day for a procurement function, the next day for a technical function, and then the day after for a sales function, compared to like an LM, which really has like in-depth knowledge around your specific domain and knows exactly, are your puzzle pieces of the CV really important for this role. And therefore you get a much more nuanced look at your CV. And another important point we see here as well, the LLM is not tired. He doesn't want to go home on a Friday afternoon. There's no kid crying in the background, whatever it might be. it's always the same kind of intelligence and like depth of analysis you get with an LLM compared to human, which obviously is fluctuating in terms of like.
And I think we heard this a lot in the market, right? So I think two real life examples. One recruiter, we had a call with the person. They mentioned, hey, after the first 200 CVs, we have an internal requirement or internal limitation that we don't look across like the 200 because we just don't have enough time, that's the biggest flaw of the whole process, right? And the second topic is subject matter expertise, right? If you're hiring for a technical role, have no experience and are not technical at all, and have to hire a backend engineer, how wouldn't you want to evaluate if a candidate is good or bad? Not by looking at their technical skills, right? You would rather look at their past companies and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But that's why we have so much more leverage, right?
Yeah. And this again is also taking off pressure from your teams doing the actual delivery, for example, of the tech side, because they get much more tailored CVs which they should look at, and obviously it takes less time for them to find good profiles to then have in the next stages compared to like a more generalized recruiter view, which is then maybe handing over profiles which a much higher fail rate. So obviously taking then also load off the actual teams which need support and the subject matter experts in your company. So this is also another point.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think for now, this is the biggest game changer, even though it's been around for a couple of years, right? But let's get into what's actually new, right? Our step after CV screening, which is essentially AI interviews that we do with candidates or AI screening calls, whatever you want to call it. What is your opinion on them now after working with them for like 18 months in total, I would say? Has your opinion changed over the time? How has your experience been? Maybe you can tell us about what our applicants are also saying.
Yeah. I mean, when we started Ovi, this was kind of our first core like idea, like having these initial audio chats or screening calls with an AI to just like offload again recruiter workload to an AI and also make the playing field more leveled out for applicants in a way that you're then just able to again give more people the chance to participate in this specific stage of the funnel, because obviously a recruiter can do 10 calls a day, an AI can do 1,000 a day. So it's just much more scalable and therefore much more fairer because you can give more people the chance. In terms of like how everything has evolved from where we started to now, this is really like a fascinating thing to see from a technology perspective, because we started with like the ability to conduct calls which were like roughly 5 minutes long, and now we're having like regular also interviews which have like 45 minutes, 50 minutes of duration, which is obviously from this capacity perspective an insane gain of capabilities. And then
But
also,
we don't prefer to do these long interviews, right, with candidates.
yeah, but the capability is there, and also the way the AI is then interacting in these calls with candidates is quite fascinating. I mean, we have in really 90% of the cases the situation that at the end the LLM or the AI system is saying, hey, thank you so much for the conversation, have a great rest of your day. And then the applicant had such a like human-like experience that he is also answering in a way saying, hey, thank you so much, I also wish you a great rest of the day, I really enjoyed the chat. So this is where we are with these kind of with the perception of these calls, right?
Which is just fascinating. I think up until like 2 years ago, when these first conversational AI models came out, no one could even imagine having a real conversation with an AI. And now I hop on the call, ask him technical questions around the role, and the AI just can answer them without any doubt. And this is the confidence that we need. Obviously, there's a lot of setup things and guardrails and everything needed in place to do these interviews, but we still hop on calls with recruitment teams that have not heard of AI interviews yet. So they're sitting on the call like, hey, it's a recording where you see the questions on the screen, right? We're like, no, it's actually an AI agent that speaks to you and has a normal conversation as you and I, Tim, are having it right now. And this is where we do definitely see the future of recruiting.
Yeah. And maybe to give you like the raw numbers once again around like what's the potential value for you as a company. I think we have it here pretty clearly on the screen. So we are really reducing the time you need per applicant for these screening calls, not from only having the call perspective, also from like the perspective not needing to schedule any calls, not needing to reschedule any calls, no ghostings which you receive. Then looking afterwards as on the need to then again communicate with the candidate, again to prepare all the data which you gather in these calls for in a like comparable format. All of this is basically abstracted with these kind of calls, while simultaneously giving more people the chance to have these calls. Again, also here we have like an expert evaluating your calls, so that the answers which you are giving here are evaluated by an AI system, which is the expert in this specific subject, and is also like using a framework which is really tailored on the job description and the competencies needed. You also have this whole topic that there is no bias involved, depending obviously on how you set up the system, but you have no accent which is evaluated, no biometrics, and these kind of topics. So this is also really interesting. So a lot of like additional factors which really are fascinating and a big value driver behind these AI screening calls, right?
And this goes back into the topic, so also what it said in the bottom of the slide. For the European AI Act, compliance will be the biggest topic. No bias, also giving the people an opportunity to actually speak to human. And this is what we've seen a lot over the last couple of months. We send out interviews to AI screening calls, and candidates have the option theoretically to speak to a human, but they prefer to do a conversation with the AI immediately. Because, as Tim said, it doesn't only give the applicants the option to go through the screening call and make their point and answer questions, but it also gives them the opportunity to ask questions proactively. So I can go in and say, hey, what is the team looking like in this role, or what is who am I going to report to? How many days are remote? All of these questions that are normally asked in the normal screening calls, we want to mitigate this. We want to make sure that they're answered by an AI. It's repetitive. It doesn't even make any sense for a human to jump on a call to answer those questions.
Yeah. And yeah, while improving the experience for the applicants, I think this is
Exactly.
a fascinating thing. And obviously, right now, we see obviously high completion rates already, and like people really enjoying these chat in form of like saying thank you and all of these topics, and also writing us emails. But therefore, we are also sure that this is becoming kind of like an industry standard in recruiting at some point, and will not go away in the short or long term. So definitely a tool in the toolkit of every CHRO, which should be considered for the recruiting part of the HR department, right?
Yep, 100%. And I think these two steps that we discussed right now are the most relevant at this point of time where we can implement AI.
Yes.
It's going to get even cooler if we go a bit later down to the funnel and get back to the human element, which will 100% never fall out of place.
Exactly.
And yeah, you're already showing it here. So live intelligence is a topic that we're seeing more and more being implemented in companies right now, but there's not a lot of solution providers yet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe Tim, what do you think about live interviews? First of all, maybe can you explain it? What is actually meant by this co-pilot in the human interview?
Exactly. It's basically a note taker specialized for recruiting calls. So you have a note taker joining the call and guiding you along the call and analyzing the call for you afterwards. So And maybe to go even one step before this, we have the ability, for example, with our tool, that you look at the data from the CV, you look at the data from the screening call, and then you let an LLM suggest, or an AI system suggest you questions you could potentially ask in a personal interview. So in the first place, developing kind of a questionnaire for this live interview is a really interesting feature, because there you can really try to maybe understand a bit better this point mentioned in the CV, maybe like understand the difference mentioned in the CV compared to the screening call, just in order to be assured that all is sound and valid the applicant is talking about. And once you're then in the call, you not only have the ability to obviously transcribe the whole conversation for like documentation and analysis afterwards, you also get again the live feedback of an AI system, and it was like which questions were already asked of the questionnaire, which kind of questions should you maybe like go deeper into and ask a few follow-up questions, and if so, what kind of questions to ask. Again, here the expert layer capabilities of an AI system coming into place. And this obviously this helps to standardize also the interview process, which is based on a lot of research, insanely important to have like well-grounded and solid hiring decisions, right? Because if you don't ask all the applicants kind of the same questions, you don't have a data set which you can compare with each other, which is then heavily impacting the quality of your decision of the hire. Right. And then afterwards, you have the ability to read, obviously, the transcript, share the transcript, and have like a really condensed summary of the answers given. So you can have this for documentation ready and also ready to be shared with other colleagues in your company.
And just again, to summarize, you have an agent sitting with you in the call that on screen can give you live feedback. And this is where the difference comes in, because a lot of these, I mean, we know these agents, Fathom, etc., that join the call, transcribe it, give you a summary at the end, fine. But now there's two layers. So on the one hand, asking the questions with data that we get from Browse Before. And the second layer is also in terms of training, right? So you can also train recruiters to get better by running through these calls and actually evaluating them, only them, afterwards. So this is actually could be a nice business as well, right?
Yes. And then maybe to go full circle here, I think it's the perfect way to talk about our last kind of use case, which we have prepared for the recruiting part of the HR domain, is the ability to forecast who will be really performing well in the job before they are hired. And this is exactly also touching on the point you just mentioned, right? Like when developing or applying models which do this forecasting and prediction, you can utilize the data of the CV results. You can utilize the screening call data. You can utilize the data of the personal interview invites, and from there detect patterns, or like obviously map this data to the performance of the people who were hired afterwards, and then try to understand what kind of patterns were these people showing in these recruiting steps or like hiring funnel steps, and how did they do in the job afterwards, and therefore then have really clear learnings who to hire then going forward in the next hiring cycles, and which kind of patterns are maybe indicators that this person might be not a good hire in terms of like maybe negotiating salary too early, being really hesitant at this step, whatever it might be in terms of like pattern.
I like that.
You can see.
But you need data, and you need a ton of data. And that's the problem for most companies. Like, where do you even start, right? Because at this point, you cannot say, hey, this guy is an overperformer. But if you go back in time and check out what the interview process was, you'll probably see an ATS where someone went through 4 different funnel steps with maybe some scorecards. We don't even know in most cases, right? But I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about this the last time, right? Like hiring a new employee, of like letting someone go or someone leaving the company and finding someone new is such an costly process that therefore this intelligence here could be a really game changer in terms of like saving money and obviously increasing efficiency and productivity and so on and so forth.
Nice. I think that was a good first glimpse into AI in recruiting, which is obviously our core expertise area. But if anyone still has any questions, please feel free to reach out via email or on LinkedIn. And we're always happy to answer any questions. We've gone through this process with a ton of companies in different sizes, from small startups to big enterprises. So please feel free to reach out. If you have any other input or ideas that we can touch upon in the next episodes, please also let us know.
Yes.
But Tim, it was a pleasure once again.
Likewise. And maybe just as the final words for this episode, AI runs the funnel, you make the call. And I think this was the same takeaway we had already for the workforce planning deep dive, right? You use AI to do the analytics, to get the data in, to just level the playing field. But in the end, the recruiter or like the person behind the system makes the call. And this is something which is obviously non-negotiable from like an ethics perspective, but also from like a regulatory perspective.
For
Just
sure.
to like finish this off with this clear statement here, also from our end, because we are very much aware and in favor, like positioning ourselves also in this way, and also our tool is built exactly in this way, right?
100%.
Cool. This was a lot of fun.
Yep.
And looking forward to the next deep dive.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.